What's going on, everybody? How's everybody doing? We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. I appreciate y'all coming in. Yes, indeed. Yes, sir. Appreciate y'all for coming in. We're going to start in about 40 seconds or so. Yes, sir. Welcome back, everybody. I appreciate y'all for coming in. This is a special, I guess you can say. We are live. This is not recorded. We are live. And let me see. I'm broadcasting on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different platforms. One of them being Black History Minute. That's one of my channels as well. For those who don't know, I have multiple YouTube channels, multiple Facebook pages, Instagram pages. We need to start broadcasting on Instagram too. I got to start setting that up. It takes a few more steps to do that. So maybe in the next coming days, weeks, and months, we'll start doing that as well on those platforms. The appropriate ones, depending on what the content is. And I wasn't, as you guys see on the screen right now, you see January 17th, of course, that just passed. We're in early February. And originally, I was going to broadcast this on January the 17th, but I was thinking about, debating on if I should do it or not. And we're going to get into the reason why, before we get started playing the replay of this reparations remedies. All right. And so first I want to say welcome to everybody on the YouTube channel, Black History Minute. This is the first time broadcasting something like this, because normally I wouldn't put it on Black History Minute. I would normally, and I appreciate somebody's on there now listening to me. I appreciate you, because these reparations things, I would say they are part of history, part of Black history. So this is the reason why I'm putting it on Black History Minute. All right. As well as Thoughts of the Week podcast, which is on our YouTube channel and our Twitch channel. Thoughts of the Week podcast is on Twitch and YouTube. And we also have What's the 411 News on YouTube and Twitch as well. And then my personal page on Facebook, I'm broadcasting as well. And again, like I said, we are live on Black History Minute on YouTube. We're going to have to set up a Twitch page for that in a few. And I think we have one for Instagram. So we're going to start broadcasting on Instagram a little bit more, broadcasting live. And so, like I said, matter of fact, let me play, let me get this. No, let me say this real quick, and then we're going to get into something else. And while I'm getting into the something else, I don't know, maybe I should do it now. And then the reparations remedy will start. So I'm going to play, matter of fact, let me play the reparations video now, because they have a long pause in it, quite a bit of a long pause before it gets started. So let me play them right now. And then I will bring, you know, when they start talking, I'll just go ahead and pull it in live. So again, like I said, originally I was going to broadcast this on the actual date or maybe the next day. So it would have been January the 17th or the 18th. But the reason why I kind of stopped and decided not to at that time, and I'll tell you why I decided to do it now. But the reason why I didn't do it back then is because I started to start thinking that these reparations task force, and, you know, New York has it live. I don't know. I think Detroit and maybe Atlanta. I don't know if they have theirs live. I got to start finding out, because I broadcast, if they're doing theirs like a live broadcast or recorded, and then they'll let you go ahead and broadcast it, or I could find out and broadcast it myself, then I would do theirs as well. But there's been reparations task force in different cities and different states. And it's getting to the point, for me anyway, that I started thinking that I think this is becoming another trick bag or distraction. Or it's one of those things where they start doing these task force and let it drag out some more, just to drag out the fact of putting anything in legislation or anything like that to even get reparations. So I was starting to think like, yo, this is just like another little trick they running, you know, continue to have people go to these reparations hearings and continue to go and go and go. Because like the one I'm getting ready to show y'all now is New York State, and they have one coming up this month. I think, let me check. Matter of fact, let me see what the date is for that. I'm gonna try to broadcast that one live for sure. Yeah, on the 14th. And let me see what that 14th is. Where I got my calendar out. Let me see. So the 14th of this month, February 14th, will be on a Saturday. And if I don't have anything else going on, and they starting at, it looks like 3:45. So if there's nothing else going on, if I got nothing else going on, if I'm not recording any videos or scheduling anything out, then I will broadcast that live. So that was the reason, my reasoning to why I didn't broadcast this thing live at first on the actual date or the day after, is because I started feeling like, yo, they just trying to run game. They just trying to, stretch this thing out to prolong any type of anything for foundational Black Americans to get this reparations. But then what made me decide to just like, you know what, I'm gonna do it today is because what we're going to get into right now, and I'm gonna pull this on the screen. All right. Here is the reason why. For some reason, here's the reason why. All right. So what you guys are looking at on the screen right now is apparently, I think on what's today's date? Today's the 9th, I think. Let me make sure, be 100% sure. Yes, today is the 9th. So 4 days ago, apparently, ABC News was doing a honoring, for Black History Month, and you see it on the screen. It says honoring contributions of foundational Black Americans. And so I figured, I found that very, very, very interesting. Very interesting, because that is telling me and showing me, and should show you, for those who are foundational Black Americans, even if you call yourself African American, or you call yourself Negro, or what is the other ones? There's a lot of different names or monikers, if you will, however you see yourself. Basically, we are talking about the descendants of the American slave. Also, when Donald Trump says was it the 14th Amendment is for the slaves of America, for American slaves, right? That's who I'm talking about. And I remember, and sometimes you still hear it today, people are still swearing up and down that the word foundational Black Americans only exist on the social media apps. But mainstream media has been using foundational Black Americans for quite a while. I say for a few years. And but you'll still hear those who want to we call the ops and the Democratic shills are going to try to downplay that. But we are in the mainstream, and we are worldwide. The name is being known. So I seen some of the video. I don't know how long this video is, but I only probably seen like maybe a minute or less of the video, which contains the images that you guys see on the screen right now. All right. And what they was doing, they mentioned, they were saying they was honoring, they used the words foundational Black American. You see that black man on the screen with the glasses on. He actually was the one speaking in whatever news reporter this guy is for ABC News. No, he said, yeah, we honoring contributions of foundational Black Americans. And then they mentioned Alexander Miles for the automatic elevator doors. And they mentioned Garrett Morgan for the 3-light traffic signal. All right. This was on the actual news. So for those who don't know, this happened a few days ago. All right. I didn't get to see it. I watched another video that contained some of this news video, and it played like maybe less than a minute of it. And again, like I said, foundational Black Americans is mainstream. It's not on the app. A lot of people have been trying to say, oh, that's just y'all just on an app. Y'all just on the app. Nobody know y'all. But for the last couple of years or so, Joy Reid's been saying something, mentioning that. Charlemagne the God's been saying foundational Black American. What's the chick's name? Angela Rye has mentioned that. Loads of people and other news outlets that's been video related has been mentioning foundational Black Americans. So they know exactly who we are. Tucker Carlson, and I don't know this other dude. I wish I had the video. I can get it, but it'll take too much time because of what I'm trying to do tonight or this evening. But they even mentioned and acknowledged foundational Black Americans. So we're known worldwide at this point. And this was the reason why I decided to go ahead and put on this reparations video because I was like, even though I'm still thinking this is might be some little trick to kind of distract and hold people off for a little while. And because before it was a thing where people were saying, well, we're going to have to do a study on reparations. And, a lot of us was not going for that. And so now people started saying, well, let's start building task force. And it seemed like, yeah, the task forces are getting created, but with problems. All right. One of the problems is these task force are allowing immigrants onto the task force that have nothing to do with anything Black Americans had to deal with during slavery times and today. So they're letting certain, I heard there was like Haitians in one, and up in Boston, there was somebody in one. I think in Atlanta, there was somebody in one. In New York, I think the lady is Jamaican, which I think you might not hear the word Jamaican, and maybe you will on this particular broadcast live we're doing right now. And so you might hear that being mentioned, but it definitely because I seen some of the what you guys are getting ready to see, the whole full video. But so we've been having those problems, like putting in different immigrants that know nothing of the history of the descendants of American slaves or of slavery. And they're being allowed to come up with ideas and orders about us in our history, in our legacy, in our lineage, all right, and our ancestors, and what's how we should get money and doing this and so on and so forth. And we're not going for that. And so I was like, you know what? Being that I heard and found out about this news thing on ABC, I said, yeah, let me go on and broadcast this live. And then from what I heard is after they broadcasted that, they put it on all their platforms. They have it on, regular TV. It was all broadcasted, the same information. They had their social media platforms. The ABC has a YouTube channel, their internet. They have their internet website. They broadcasted it everywhere. And then they decided to remove it. They removed it off their website, and they removed it off of YouTube. If it hasn't been back on there since then, but they removed everything. And a lot of people are wondering and questioning, what's up with that? Why all of a sudden they removed it? And people are thinking one reason is because they were trying to test and get a feel for how many people were feeling this. And they found out that when they broadcasted this broadcast about honoring foundational Black Americans' contributions to America and the world, they even mentioned the world, I think, if I'm not mistaken. When they was doing all of that, they was getting a lot of hits. A lot of people was checking it out, probably in the millions. And a lot of people were thinking that was a test, like the so-called powers that be were trying to put a feeler out and to see, how serious are these people? Are they serious, or it's just another thing they do like they always do? They protest for a little while and then they drop off slowly. So they found out that, hey, people are really into this. They're not going away. And I guess once they found that out, they decided to pull the video off their YouTube channel and remove it off the website. I think they might have, I guess you can only watch it on TV, but so long. And so that's what happened. ABC removed it. What you guys are seeing on the screen now, they're honoring foundational Black Americans, and they use the term foundational Black Americans, which is a lineage, by the way. And I also want to say, because a lot of we've been having a lot of ops come around and say and trying to provoke and put a little something in the Fed's ear saying it's a hate group. They don't like Africans and they don't like nobody, and they're trying to separate. For those who got sense in their heads and they know what's going on, they know what it's about, you know what it is. All right. We are not a hate group. We are a lineage of people who have ancestors who were slaves. We have a history here that goes over 400 years. And like I said, people know who we are. They just know now. And for those who are, because we do have, unfortunately, we have Pan-Africans who also are foundational Black Americans, but they're caping for the Pan-African movement. And for those other folks who may not be Pan-African, but they're still foundational Black Americans, but they still were up on these apps and stuff like that, claiming that nobody knows foundational. They never heard foundational Black Americans. You see it on the screen, ABC News, and it's been, like I said, it's been being broadcast for quite some time. But we've been mainstream for quite a while, just to put it bluntly. This didn't just happen yesterday, okay? Let's get that straight. This did not happen yesterday. I think the reparations hearings are getting ready to start very shortly here, probably within a minute or so. But that was my reasoning for going ahead and deciding to broadcast this reparation. Now, like I said, February the 14th, which is Saturday, I think if I have nothing to do, I'm going to broadcast this live as well. And I'm going to continue. I think I'm going to broadcast it on Black History Minute as well as my other channels. There they go. You hear them now. So we're going to bring them in. I get to see this from January 17th. Right? One love, peace.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for being here with us today. I am Dr. Deborah D. Jenkins, the Vice Chair of the New York State Community Commission on Reparations Remedies. Joining us virtually is the Commission Secretary, Commissioner Linda Tarrant Reed. And sitting next to me is our General Counsel, India Sneed Williams. We thank you for joining us today in person and virtually here in the city of Binghamton, New York, for this critically important public hearing. I open this gathering by acknowledging that Binghamton has served as a key stop in the Underground Railroad network, helping freedom seekers travel north towards safety. Local abolitionists, conductors, and faith communities supported the movement through safe locations and advocacy. The story of Black Binghamton, its community, its struggles, and its resilience unfolded in a small area in Binghamton's African American community, historically concentrated in a small area in the 7th Ward, forming strong economic agency even during the antebellum period. I was pleased to awaken and find an article just written yesterday about the good work that Professor Wendy Wells is doing at the University of Binghamton, where she leads the SOURCE project that is in 2026 uncovering racial covenants that predated redlining. Binghamton is an important place for us to be, and we are happy to be here. This afternoon's hearing focuses on truth and transformation because we believe that true reconciliation is impossible without genuine transformation. History shows us that when societies attempt to move forward without materially reckoning with past harms, the status quo remains intact and injustice persists. Transformation requires an honest confrontation with the realities faced by those who were harmed, including lasting social, economic, and material conditions that resulted from those injustices. It demands not only truth-telling, but a commitment to meaningful change that addresses those conditions and honors the legacy of those like Callie House, who fought for repair and justice long before us. And yet, Binghamton is also a place of extraordinary strength, The city has long been home to advocates, faith leaders, educators, reentry organizations, and grassroots community builders working tirelessly to support returning citizens, expand treatment and recovery options, and fight for justice despite inequitable systems. Holding the hearing at the American Legion's Post 80 in Binghamton situates our work in a space long dedicated to service, civic responsibility, and community gathering. As a place where veterans and community members have come across generations, it provides a fitting setting for reflection, dialogue, and public testimony. This afternoon, we come together to listen, to bear witness, and to tell the truth. Your testimonies, experiences, and insight will guide the Commission's recommendations to the legislature and governor on how New York State can repair the harms of discriminatory criminal justice policies, as well as the overall transformation needed to move this work forward. Thank you for all being here, for your courage, and for your commitment to justice. Before you is the agenda and the run of today's program. If there are, at this time, any elected officials, we'd love to have you come forward and give remarks. If you are not currently here, we will leave space for you in a latter part of the program. I would like to just make mention, before we get too deeply into today's program, for those who are joining us virtually, we'd ask that you would please turn off your cameras and mute your transmission, just in order to have a very clear transmission. Briefly, I'll remind everyone of the Commission's origins and legislative purpose and goals. Despite what many assume, slavery was deeply entrenched in New York's history. In 1626, the Dutch first brought enslaved Africans to the Lenape, Delaware territory, called the Manhattan. The Dutch called it New Amsterdam. Today, many call this place after its Lenape name, Manhattan. By the early 18th century, the New York State had become the largest enslaving colony in the North, with 40% of white households enslaving Black relatives. In 1711, a slave market was established at the foot of Wall Street, at what is now the intersection of Wall and Water Street. This market, in which Native and Black people were sold, remained active for decades, playing a central role in New York City's economy. Enslavement wasn't just a Southern institution, it was the foundation to New York's development. Here we have an excerpt from the 1800 census in New York State, illustrating the pervasiveness of slavery in this northern state. In 1799, New York passed legislation for gradual abolition. Additionally, abolition wasn't fully implemented in New York until 1827. This census document shows how New York counted enslaved people under the 3/5 clause of the Constitution, which enhanced Southern political power and is one example of the North's continued complicity in the institution of slavery. I'm going to slow down so that the slides can catch up with us. Oh, it's me. Click. Tell me. I'm the one who needed to catch up with the slides. Okay. We talked about Wall Street, 1800, Emancipation Day. So this slide shows in 1863, where Thomas Nast illustrated Harper's Weekly depiction of the horrors of slavery that contrasted with the aspirational vision of freedom, including payment for work, public education, and home ownership. There were dreams that many formerly enslaved people held, but the reality of post-emancipation USA falls short. Reparations are about bringing the vision of communal abundance to fruition. At the federal level, H.R. 40, which would establish a national commission to study and develop reparations proposal for African Americans, was first introduced in 1989 by Representative John Conyers Jr. and has been reintroduced in Congress every year since without passage. The state of California's reparation efforts have become the first state to establish a reparations task force in 2020, with their final report issued to the California legislature on the 29th of June in 2023. At the time this 2024 map was created, at the time that this map was created, reparations actions have been established in 8 states and 22 localities across the United States. That number is growing, and New York is the second state to take up this mantle. A brief overview in the context in which we are here today of the New York State Commission's establishment. It was established via legislation signed by Governor Hochul on the 19th of December in 2023. This bill was sponsored by Assembly Member Michael Salages and Senator James Sanders. The commission is tasked with examining the legacy of slavery, subsequent discrimination, and their continuing impacts, and developing recommendations for appropriate remedies. To be clear, this commission does not enact reparative policies or provide payments or compensation or restitution. This commission will make recommendations to elected officials that New Yorkers have chosen. The elected officials of New York State will decide which reparative recommendations they want to advance. This is a picture of the legislation, and this legislation is found on our website. So our core mandates, what are our core mandates? To research economic, social, and political impact of slavery and structural discrimination on Black New Yorkers from 1626 to the present day, and to determine who is eligible for reparations, to hold public hearings as we are doing today, gathering the community, to hear from you, for you to give your input, and to develop a comprehensive report outlining harms and reparative measures, to recommend policies, programs, and restorative payments, and to coordinate with local, state, and national collaborators to ensure alignment with broader reparation initiatives. The Community Commission for Reparations and Remedies are comprised of 9 members. Our chair is Dr. Chanel Hawkins. We have Linda Brown Robinson, Laurie Daniel Favors, Dr. Ron Daniels, Dr. Derek Hamilton, Timothy R. Hogues, Jennifer Jones Austin, Linda Tarrant Reed, and as I said earlier, myself, Deborah Jenkins. We are happy to introduce to some and to present to others the commission staff. To my left and in the back, for those of you in the room, we have our operations manager, Ms. Melody Harkness. And seated next to her is our executive administrative assistant, Ms. Jessie Adwar. And sitting next to myself, again, is our general counsel, India Sneed Williams. And our parliamentarian is Stuart J. Mitchell III. And our communications representative, Words Warriors, public relations, in the back of the room with us. Not here today are our policy analysts and research historians. They are represented by Policy Studies Associates. Those are our current staff members, and we are looking to bring on additional staff members to assist us in this very important work. Listed here is the executive committee for the commission. Here is our website and our official email address for anyone who seeks to be in contact with us or to stay current with our business meetings and our public hearings. Our business meetings, briefly, I will share with you. The primary focus of these meetings is to take care of the internal business of the commission, including internal discussions that sometimes become back and forth exchanges in order for us to do the very best on this commission. We have a lot of decisions that have to be made and planned by the commissioners, and at these business meetings is where that work takes place. A quorum of at least 5 commissioners must be present to hold any votes. These meetings are open to the public, but because these meetings are devoted primarily to commission business, the time for receiving public comments may be limited to a short period at the end of each meeting. Business meetings will be live streamed and video recordings will be available on the commission's website for later viewing. The public hearing, which we're having today, they have a different tenor. They provide an opportunity for the community and other interested parties to share input and concerns and provide testimony on topics relevant to the commission's mission and assisted in carrying out its mandate to examine the institution of slavery in New York State and to recommend appropriate remedies and reparations in consideration of the commission's findings. The commission may invite speakers to provide testimony on particular topics, but the commission also intends to devote a significant part of the agenda to hearing from members of the public wishing to speak. Because the public hearings are focused on gathering information rather than on conducting commission business, a quorum of commissioners is not required. But the commission intends to have at least 2 or 3 commissioners present at every public hearing. Public hearings will be live streamed and video recordings will be available on the commission's website for later viewing. We also accept written comments from the public. If you're unable to attend a meeting or hearing, or time simply runs out, we would still like to hear from you. Members of the community and other interested parties are always welcome to submit written comments to the commission's email address at reparationscommission@reparations.ny.gov. That's reparationscommission@reparations.ny.gov. We seek for you to get involved. Even after the public hearings end, we are still receiving calls. We are happy to schedule meetings where possible to get your input. So please get involved. And we are still hiring for critical roles. Here are a list of ways that you can get involved. You can attend these public hearings and community forums. You can host a public hearing or business meeting in your space. Sign up and testify at these public hearings. Send recommendations to the commission via email. They work. Engage in dialogues and workshops on reparations in your community. Invite one of two commissioners so that we can come and support your work. And finally, you can volunteer for community outreach initiatives. More of that information will be posted on our website in the coming weeks. We are really serious about the task before us, so we really can't stress more how important your voices are to us making the appropriate recommendations to the state legislators and our governor. So we invite your input, and we can't stress that more. We don't currently have any vacancies. We are in the process of bringing on those who we have interviewed to support the work of the commission. Now to the part that we've perhaps all been waiting for, at least I have, because I love to be a student. We are happy to have as our first presenter, Dr. Ann C. Bailey, Professor and Director of the Harriet Tubman Center for Freedom and Equity. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Bailey, who is a writer, historian, and a professor of history at SUNY Binghamton's Harriet Tubman Center for Freedom and Equity. In her work, she combines the elements of travel, adventure, history, and an understanding of contemporary issues with an accessible style. Her work ranges from adult nonfiction to children's historical fiction and includes such titles as African Voices of the Atlantic Slave Trade, Beyond the Silence and the Shame, published in 2005. And You Can Make a Difference, the story of Martin Luther King Jr., how appropriate this weekend. Her newest book, The Weeping Time, Memory and the Largest Slave Auction in American History, was published by Cambridge University Press in October 2017. Dr. Bailey is also committed to sharing her work with the public at various events. Of note, on March 18, 2015, she was invited to speak at the United Nations on the occasion of the commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. She shared her research, writing, and other professional experiences with NGOs that are affiliated with the United Nations. In so doing, she was able to honor the lives and contributions of enslaved Black Americans and others in the African diaspora. Dr. Bailey, we welcome you and thank you for sharing your testimony today. Thank you. Thank you.
It's an honor on behalf of the Tubman Center, the Harriet Tubman Center for Freedom and Equity of Binghamton University, and my associate director, Dr. Sharon Bryant, as well as my team at the Tubman Center. We have Jerome Nenger here who is representing that team to be here today. I am a Jamaican-born US citizen, and I stand here before I say anything else that as an immigrant, I owe a great debt to the people of America, but in particular, African Americans who have been fighting for freedom ever since their consistent presence here in the United States, and I'm standing on their shoulders, and I am grateful. The title of my talk is The Expanded Vision for America, and I'm going to briefly tell you a little bit more about what I've been doing and what the team has been doing at the Tubman Center and at Binghamton University. I'm then going to talk a little bit about my own writing, some of which has been referenced here. Thank you very much, Dr. Jenkins. And then I'm going to spend a good deal of time talking about why reparations are warranted and some recommendations. And then finally, I'm going to close with some discussion of the very title, the expanded vision for America, reparations and an expanded vision for America. And first, let me say that this talk is inspired by the scripture, without vision, the people perish, and we will not perish. So I very much believe that all things should start with a real strong sense of vision. I want to commend Vice Chair Dr. Jenkins and the chair in his absence for the good work that is being done by this commission. I want to say that I'm very impressed by the public hearings and the fact that we have public hearings, drawing on the model, I think, of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa, but taking it even further. Dr. Daniels talks about truth and transformation, and I want to commend this comment that I read about in your proceedings, that Dr. Daniels explains that it's not truth and reconciliation. Reconciliation isn't possible without transformation. In other words, if we want to see transformation, if we want to see reconciliation, which is what we want, racial reconciliation especially, we have to have transformation. And I really appreciate that distinction. We at the Tubman Center have also been inspired by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. And I want to say that I had the pleasure of visiting South Africa this summer. I highly recommend it, especially because there's a lot of misinformation about what is going on there. And I think it's good to be able to see for ourselves where the society is going in terms of reconciliation, the progress they've made, and even some of the challenges which still remain. So let me share with you how our work began at the Harriet Tubman Center. It began literally in the midst of the reaction to the George Floyd murder in 2020. And all across the country, as you know, including our campus, we weren't alone, but all across the country, communities were in an uproar about this murder that had taken place. And it really spoke to the inequities of our society, not only in the justice system, but as it turns out, even in the way we memorialize people of the past. And what happened as a result of his murder, there were many things, as you know, but one of the things that happened is that a number of protesters actually started pulling down Confederate statues. This is what happened here in New Orleans, but this happened elsewhere as well. And almost 100 of them were pulled down. Some of them were pulled down on their own. Some of them, there was actually a democratic process, which is what I highly recommend, in order to, the city council or what have you decided that they needed to come down and be removed to a museum and so forth. In the midst of this process, we looked at this and said, when you pull these statues down, if they don't represent, if the Confederate statues do not represent the American experience now in the 21st century, what does? You see, it's not enough just to pull something down. What do you actually believe in? What are our values? And in our estimation, when we looked around our own community in terms of Binghamton, the Southern Tier, and upstate New York, we thought that Harriet Tubman and the multicultural group of abolitionists that form our Freedom Trail, that they more represented, if you will, what American values we wanted to aspire to and that we hope that the country would aspire to. And so our trail, let me give you a quick look of Harriet. If you have not seen her, please go and see her. She gets lonely if you don't go visit her. Our trail starts on our campus, 67 Washington Street, where Harriet Tubman was unveiled March 21st of last year. But then there are 13 stops all around downtown Binghamton, which represent, again, Black and white, and even Native American, there's reference to Native Americans as well, female heroes who were involved in the Underground Railroad and the Civil Rights Movement. And we just wanted to make clear that people who fought for freedom and justice and equity These are the people that we want to look up to. These are the people that we think represent our society better. I want to thank, at this time, I always like to thank the governor of New York, Governor Hochul, who largely sponsored this project, Mayor Jared Graham, who's been an ongoing supporter of this project, State Senator Leah Webb, who's here today. We want to thank her and her staff. Really, we want to give you your flowers right now. Assemblywoman Donna Lupardo and others who have been a big part of making this happen. It didn't happen. We didn't do it on our own. We had a lot of help and a lot of support. Memorialization of this history, it is to say, is a big part of reparations for us. It's a big part of it. We don't think that it's just about programs and activities. It's also about remembering the past and remembering it correctly. We will agree, though, that the Truth and Reconciliation process of South Africa that inspired this for us, because that's really what happened. We got interested in doing this work because we thought, let's replicate a Truth and Reconciliation process here. Let's look at where we've been, what's happened before, what the harms were, and so forth. And let's see what we can repair in the present. Let's take recommendations, just as you're doing here. And that's how the statue and the Freedom Trail Project came about. But one of the problems with what happened in South Africa was that there wasn't enough emphasis on actual repair and reparations. And in fact, if you're following the news, just January 13th, 17,000 of the 22,000 people who participated in the Truth and Reconciliation process in South Africa are just now getting some form of reparations, to the tune of about $1,800 in US dollars. And that's how many years after the process? This process ended in, as you may or may not know, in the early 2000s, in 2003. So if you think about it, reparations tends to be the last thing on the list, actual reparations. And we're happy that this commission is making sure that that doesn't happen, that we actually have actual reparations in a very concrete way. So that speaks to the heart of the issue. I have here in this slide, because now I want to pivot. I've told you a little bit about some of the work writ large, some of the comparatives in terms of what's going on in South Africa, what we're doing here in Binghamton in terms of the Freedom Trail. But now I want to go a little bit more narrower to my work, which speaks to these larger issues, my own personal research work. My upcoming book is called The Age of Repair, and I'm going to cover all of this territory and more than likely reference some of the good work that's been done here and by other commissions like the California Commission on Reparations. My thought about history and this historical work is that we first have to recover the stories. Reparations begins with the stories. Part of, I think, the problem that we have is that we have not only do we need to recover the stories, but we have to keep telling the stories. It's now that I hear more people talking about the civil rights movement. Now I teach a course on the civil rights movement here at Binghamton University, and others do, connect with parts of that history, but it's kind of like for history buffs. No, this is our story. And one of the issues that I find in doing the writing is that we have to encourage more writing, more research, and in fact, I hope that the commission will spend quite a bit give quite a bit of assistance to those who would do this work. I think I don't need to tell you that if we don't keep telling these stories and help to co-create some new stories, I don't need to tell you that what will happen is that alternative facts will become the order of the day. I don't need to tell you that. You've seen that. We've all seen how that happens, how even in the present, something that you see with your own eyes in a video or elsewhere can be interpreted some other way. So having people who are committed to telling these stories and telling them from multiple viewpoints and telling them in the most authentic way possible is really important. It's really critical. So that's a little bit of what I've been trying to do. As I mentioned, my upcoming book is called The Age of Repair. My past book, African Voices, tried to do the same. African Voices of the Atlantic Slave Trade, Beyond the Silence and the Shame. I tried to capture the stories from Africa, from Ghana specifically, where in southern Ghana, they were both victims of the trade as well as they were individuals who were participating in the trade. And I tried to look at it in a global network and try to understand how that pressure had such an impact on not just Ghana, but much of West Africa and Central Africa as a whole, a devastating impact, in fact, and how much of that came from the global forces that were pushing against the continent, way beyond any kind of individual involvement, which really was a transcontinental impact. I also tried to look in my most recent book on the weeping from the African-American perspective on this very large slave auction, which in 1859 determined that over 400 people would be sold away from their families, completely drawn away from the land, from the people that they knew. I mean, slavery is drudgery, but nonetheless, if you have a connection to the land, if you have a connection to people, your family, that's a way to alleviate the drudgery of slavery and the period of enslavement, and that they were pulled away from. And I talk about that, and I trace over 15% of people of African descent who were sold on that auction block in Savannah in 1859. I trace them to the present day in the record and in person. So again, telling the stories is really, really important. I just like to show the slide because, to end slavery, people of African descent were very involved in ending slavery. Every now and again, I see these reactions to the work that we do, and people will say, well, my ancestors died, meaning my white ancestors died in the Civil War, as if to say only whites fought for the ending of slavery, which they did not fight the war for the ending of slavery, by the way. That was not the original war aim. But nonetheless, we honor those who did fight in the Civil War for the eventual aim of ending slavery. We do honor their service, but we can't forget that people of African descent there were 40,000 people who lost their lives, and almost 200,000 people of African descent fought for their own freedom. And they fought for their own freedom from day one. That was always a war aim. It wasn't a war aim that came about in the middle. It was always a war aim. So I like to just remind us that that's part of the African-American contribution, and that's some of what I talk about in the Weeping Time, in tracing even those who were sold on the auction block to their wartime service in the Civil War. The 1619 Project from the New York Times, I was also grateful for the opportunity to work for that project and to contribute to a standalone article in 2020 called They Sold Human Beings Here. You're free to look it up, it's free online. And I just want to say that what's important about this project, which, as you know, has gotten all kinds of attention around the world, and hats off to Nicole Hannah-Jones, who was the originator. But what was important about what we were trying to do is to recover these stories. In this article, once again, recovering the stories, tracing the country back and forth, for several months, and with various research assistants of the Tubman Center, there were 1 million plus slave sales before the Civil War in 1861, 1 million plus in the 100 years before the Civil War. And we were only able to find 35 sites across the country where that's marked in any way. So you do the math. We have not remembered or recovered these stories enough to be able to tell our children and grandchildren what took place, and for all of us to understand how deeply impactful that was. In this particular article, I do speak about the slave market of New York, by the way, that was adjacent to Wall Street, and talk about that contribution, again, of people of African descent to the building up of New York. And I might also mention the Native American contribution at the same time, because they were obviously also impacted. So where do we go from here, and what do we learn from these writings? I'm going to go through this really quickly. From all of this writing, we should learn, I think, that there was an incredible contribution from people of African descent to the wealth of America, starting from the 1619 period, where there's that consistent presence, and for 250 years of uncompensated labor. And this just cannot be underscored, that 250 years of uncompensated labor translates to to what would, I don't know what the figure would be. I've sometimes have students who try to figure it out. My economics students try to figure out what that figure would be, but we can see it. We see it in the bridges that were built, the roads that were built. We see it in the houses. We see it in the receipts, if you will, what we're standing on, what we're looking at. And so that's one of the major things that you get from the writings, not just mine, but the writings of others who have contributed to the history of slavery and the history of enslavement. Abraham Lincoln's and reparations, I like to make a note here that when we're told, giving free money, which is what the perception of reparations is, that we're going to just be giving free money, if you will, to people of African descent, I like to remind people of the law that Abraham Lincoln signed into law May 20th, 1862, where settlers got 160 acres of public land, the Homestead Act. It's like these little known facts. It's not little, it's little known, but it's not little to get 160 acres of public land just because you're a white settler, just because, not small. 1862, President Lincoln compensating, that's the only place, is DC, ironically, where slave owners were compensated for their enslaved population, compensated financially, given free money, okay? I mean, these are not little facts. This is fundamental. And DC was the only place where that was done, but I think it's significant that it was DC. Whereas in the South, when 40 acres, many of you know about 40 acres and the mule, whereas in this case, that was not sustained. The 40 acres and a mule, that project was aborted. It was started, but it was aborted, which is why we're seeking reparations now. I won't go much further into some of this because it's already been mentioned, but there have always been Black-led movements for reparations. And Callie House, again, little known, but should be known, was someone who was rallying the government from 1890s. This is not new. And she was doing it from an apolitical perspective, just based herself on being an ex-slave. There have been gains, and I want to say we're grateful for those gains, but there have been continued inequalities. And we want to look at even the civil rights gains of the 1950s and 60s as gains that we need to maintain and sustain, because they're under threat right now. So even those gains, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, right now, need to be sustained. But the inequality continues, and I have some statistics there. One inequality, which is near and dear to my heart, is this whole issue of memorialization. And as I mentioned, there are 1,800 Confederate monuments, but I mentioned to you already, there are 35 marked spots across the country that commemorate this place of trauma for people of African descent in terms of slave auctions and Black suffering. So now let me get into some quick recommendations. I think a lot of my recommendations very much line up with some of the things that have been talked about in California. Ms. Moore, I look forward to your presentation. I've read that report. It's 1,000 pages. It's amazing. Trailblazing, and also listened to some of the recommendations made to this commission in other public hearings. And they line up: freedom schools, education funds. And I want to say that this is not just for people of African descent. I think the lack of knowledge is really present for all of us, and myself included. I'm still learning. A lot of this process in developing the Freedom Trail was very humbling, because you think to yourself, this is my specialty, and I'm still learning. Oh my goodness, so-and-so did this. I'm learning about a Garrett Smith and his contributions. He was a white landowner and very wealthy upstate landowner who gave land, thousands of acres, to Black males so that they would be able to vote. I mean, there are all these, again, little known but not little facts that need to be learned. And I think many of us need extra opportunities to do so, in not only outside of school, but in community centers. Home ownership, I think, is important. Land, access to land, having mentioned land. One of the places that Garrett Smith did this, by the way, was in Timbuktu, New York, which is North Elba, New York now. And all you see there is a marker, There's no land that you can find that would say, oh, so-and-so was here and so-and-so. So, I mean, access to land is really critical. I could go on about that across the country, because Black farmers in the 1920s, owned millions of acres, and now they have 1.5% of land across the country. So that tells you the disparities right there. Community centers, I want again a shout out to Senator Leah and the mayor, Mayor Cram, who are helping to sponsor our own community center, which we will have within the year in downtown Binghamton, to again mentor young people, to teach some of this information, share some of this. I look forward to that. I look forward to ways in which that we can share this information about what the civil rights heroes did, the process of nonviolence, the tactics that they use that were so effective, how they use public relations to be effective. Those things have to be taught. They taught themselves. If you know anything about the civil rights movement, you'll know that the Highlander School was one of the places that they went and trained themselves before they went out there and they did their various campaigns. They didn't just get up and go with a camera. Oh no, they trained themselves. And I think we need that again. I won't go into this in much detail, addressing ongoing harms, prison reform, immigration crackdowns. Clearly, we need a lot of help there in the way we address this issue, and drug addiction recovery programs. And finally, I want to just say that part of the vision that I see for this, and I told you I was originally from Jamaica, and people often reference Jamaican songs. I like to reference sometimes Jamaican proverbs. And there's this one called "The Same Knife, Stick Sheep, Stick Goat." It kind of speaks for itself. And I think that really reflects what's going on when you think about this issue of reparations and racial reconciliation. We have this idea that, well, if it's just, we just deal with those people. But it doesn't work that way. The same knife that deals with some deals with others. And another way to say that is rain to fall on one man's house. And you can see that, right? Like, the rain doesn't fall on my house, and then across the street, my Italian neighbor doesn't get any rain. But the flip side is, when good happens on my side, good can happen on her side too. And I think that that has been the tradition of fighting for civil rights in the United States. When good is done for the African American community or people of African descent, we have seen good happen for the community at large. We have seen it. We have seen it happen for women through the civil rights movement. We have seen it happen for Native Americans. We've seen it happen for Asian Americans. We've seen it happen for so many other campaigns. And that's because I don't know why that is. I just can tell you that historically, whenever there has been good done for African Americans or people of African descent in this country, it has extended writ large. It has not stayed within the African American community. And that should make us really interested in supporting reparations. And I said, time longer than rope speaks for itself. So let's wait, let's believe time is longer than some of the injustices that we see going on right now. And we will prevail. And I think that people like Martin Luther King, as we honor him this weekend, gives us a roadmap for following. And last, let me just end with this. I hope I haven't been too much over our time, is that Martin Luther King talked a lot about love. And that's what the Highlander School was also trying to teach. That's what he was trying to teach, and other heroes were trying to teach in their faith communities, in their community centers, and what have you, is that you literally have to be a light shining in the dark right now, a million points of light, and that you don't face darkness with more darkness. You don't face name calling, to be specific, with more name calling, but better name calling. You face it with, I hope, a million points of light. And I do believe that every act of kindness, now more than ever, especially to our neighbors, whether they're immigrants or others, is an act of resistance. And I hope that will be some of the vision that we will carry with us when we think about reparations, that it's not just about the tangible things that we want out of this process, but it's a vision of how we look at ourselves and how we look at each other and how we operate with one another. And I do believe it can be a vision that's more rooted in freedom, more rooted in equity, more rooted in justice, and that can bring about the reconciliation that we so desire. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bailey. If you could wait around for the question and answers after our next presenter, we'd really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was really enriching, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Before we go on to our next presenter, I do want to formally recognize our state senator, Senator Leah Webb. Would you like to speak now or later, Senator? You want to hear the presentation too? We thank you, thank you, thank you. But we're so happy because she facilitated this meeting being here today, so we are grateful to you. Now I'm pleased to introduce Camilla V. Moore, Esquire, the former chair of the California Reparations Task Force from June 2021 through June 2023. Attorney Moore is a reparatory justice scholar and an attorney with a specialization in entertainment and intellectual property transactions. As a law student, Ms. Moore contributed to human rights reports related to domestic and international human rights issues, including but not limited to racial inequality in Brazil, the human rights to sanitation in Lowndes County, Alabama, in the United States, and the human rights to remedy for Indigenous Black women affected by racialized gender violence in Papua New Guinea. While studying abroad at the University of Amsterdam, Moore wrote a master's thesis exploring the intersection between international law and reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade, chattel slavery, and their legacies. She earned a Juris Doctorate degree from Columbia Law School in New York City, a Master's of Law degree in International Criminal Law and from the University of Amsterdam, and a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Los Angeles at UCLA, that's UCLA. Camilla Moore was appointed to the Reparations Task Force by the Speaker of the Assembly, Anthony Rendon. May I welcome Camilla V. Moore.
Good afternoon, everybody. So happy to be here.
Good afternoon.
My name is Camilla Moore, and I served as the chairperson of the First in the Nation California Reparations Task Force. So without further ado, I'll get straight into my presentation, where essentially I'm just giving some insights, some high-level takeaways. Since the California Reparations Task Force, we finished our work in June of 2023. So in June of 2026, it'll be 3 years since the commission finished our work. And now it's up to the California State Legislature to turn our over 200 policy recommendations that was within our over 1,000-page report. It's up to the California State Legislature now to turn those recommendations into actual law. And then, of course, it's up to the governor of our state to sign those laws. So yeah, also without further ado, I also want to just ground this conversation. I want to give honor to God, who is the head of my life, but also I want to give honor to the ancestors, right? Actual enslaved Africans in the United States, for which if they did not labor, I would not be here today. Also, thank you so much, Dr. Bailey, for uplifting the name of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It is his birthday weekend this weekend, and I'll also be mentioning him in my presentation as well. So essentially, my presentation is called Truth and Transformation, which we know is the general theme of this hearing. But in terms of my takeaway from this theme, I thought, how could I contribute to this conversation? Being the chair of the California Reparations Task Force with the work already being completed. And so I saw it as, how can I help the New York Reparations Task Force kind of wrap their heads around, going from truth to transformation, from historical record to public obligation, to New York State actually, taking whatever you guys come up with in terms of the documented harms and the recommendations, and how do we get to the point where we actually get New York State to implement those recommendations. Truth and transformation are not just slogans in the reparations context. They actually describe a moral and legal consequence. Under international law, reparations are governed by 5 recognized forms. So when most Americans, when they think about reparations, they just think about compensation or cash payments. But actually under international law, there's an actual legal definition. And within that definition encompass 5 forms of reparations. So compensation is one of the forms of reparations under international law, but it's not limited to compensation. Compensation is very important, and we can't talk about reparations without talking about compensation. But there are other forms of reparations under international law as well, which Dr. Bailey also mentioned, like satisfaction. Satisfaction is more symbolic forms of reparations, like memorials, like a formal apology for slavery and systemic discrimination from the state of New York, for instance. Rehabilitation is another form of reparations under international law. Dr. Bailey in her presentation mentioned some suggested recommendations. For instance, community centers. That was actually one of the recommendations from the California Reparations Task Force, like community centers. That is a form of reparations under the bucket of, you could say, rehabilitation, right? How do we rehabilitate the mind, the body, based on, the traumas that Black Americans have faced, in this country. And then also restitution is another form of reparations under international law. And in the state of California, we've actually made a lot of progress in terms of restitution. A lot of people may or may not have heard about, for instance, the Bruce Beach, where in the 1900s, there was a African-American couple who owned like a beach resort in Manhattan Beach. But the Manhattan Beach City Council at the time in the 1900s took the land away from them under racially motivated eminent domain. And that land laid vacant for decades until a few years ago, when Los Angeles County worked to find the descendants of that African-American couple, and they were able to provide some type of monetary compensation for, to the descendants. And the only reason why they didn't get the land back is because Manhattan Beach City Council still rezoned the land. So instead of it being, business oriented, where they could, get money from LA County and put a hotel back on that land, Manhattan Beach refused to rezone the land. So it could only be used for, a park or residential. And, the descendants didn't really want to do that. So, but that's an example of restitution. How do you take account for stolen land, stolen property, things like that? And then the last but not least, the last form of reparations under international law is guarantees of non-repetition. And it's actually one of the hardest forms of reparations to achieve, because it's tackling the fundamental question of how do you get the state or the harming party to stop harming, the injured group, right? So, that could take into, account for, restructuring of different public policies and things like that. And so also I wanted to mention that a core principle under international law is that the injured group must lead. The injured group must dictate what repair looks like to them, right? So it's not enough so governments exist to facilitate repair, right? The New York Reparations Commission exists to facilitate the repair, not to define, what repair looks like for the injured group, and not to define or dilute its meaning. That principle shaped California's work, and it should shape New York's work as well. So just a little bit about California's work and just how we were structured. California began this process through a formal study and development phase mandated by law. The Reparations Task Force was charged with investigating the history of slavery and systemic discrimination, documenting how those harms were created and sustained through public policy. We heard directly from affected communities, the descendants of enslaved African Americans, and we engaged with economists and legal scholars to translate that history into reparations proposals. In doing so, the task force documented how Black Californians were systemically excluded from the New Deal programs, for example, the GI Bill, the Federal Housing Administration mortgage programs, and other state and federal policies, producing a wealth gap that persists today. That was not an abstract finding. It was an evidentiary record of state-created harm. In reparations, truth is not something to be endlessly argued about. It is something that must be documented so that the state is legally required to respond. I mentioned that I was going to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. very briefly. In some of his speeches before he was assassinated, he talked about one of the examples of these exclusionary public policies. He talked about the Federal Homestead Act, right? Where, and in his words, so to speak, he mentioned, right, while the United States government was refusing, right, to undergird African Americans with an economic floor, at the same time, the United States government was allowing thousands and thousands of Europeans, poor Europeans, to come to the United States and undergirding them with an economic floor, providing them thousands and thousands and thousands of free land, of free acres, right? While at the same time excluding African Americans from that policy. Yeah, there were some African Americans who were able to benefit from the Homestead Act, but by and large, African Americans were excluded from the Homestead Act. And that's just one example, right, of exclusionary public policies on the state and federal level. And what are the present day impacts of that exclusionary public policy, right? One example of that, what we uncovered under the California Reparations Task Force, we uncovered that there's nearly a quarter of the adult population in the United States are still economic benefactors of the Homestead Act, right? So that's a quarter of the white adult population in the United States still benefits from the fact that their ancestors got free land from the Homestead Act, right? And they still benefit from, that exclusionary public policy in many ways. Either they still had the land in their family, they sold it, throughout their lineage, they were able to make a profit and then turn that into other things. So again, these are just one example. And Martin Luther King Jr. mentioned this in the 60s, right? One example of a piece of exclusionary public policy that has aided in this wealth gap that exists between Black Americans and white Americans, which presently, without a reparative justice framework, it would take over 250 years to close that wealth gap. Okay, so what California produced was not simply a report, it produced a reparations architecture. I think that's one of the high-level takeaways that I think New York would benefit from, understanding that reparations is a public policy conversation, right? Reparations is not some theoretical thing. When we're talking about reparations, we're talking about public policy. We're talking about public policy frameworks to rectify hundreds and hundreds of years of exclusionary public policy, from the GI Bill, to the Federal Housing Administration bills, to the Homestead Act, but starting with slavery, right? Slavery was the first example of exclusionary public policy that has led to this huge racial wealth gap. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about reparations. We're having a public policy conversation, and we're having a conversation around building an architecture to rectify decades and decades, centuries even, of exclusionary public policy. So the reparations architecture includes a defined harm population. You got to know who is the population that has been harmed. You have to define that, right? You also have to provide or design remedies and an administrative structure to deliver those remedies. You have to also provide a funding mechanism to sustain them, right? That is how moral claims become governmental responsibility. The California Reparations Task Force, we also hired 5 economists. We took our job very, very seriously. We found some of the top economists in the country and in the world even, because we even had a German economist on our team. And the economists played a critical role in this transformation. They were able to find data to show and prove that the state of California has discriminated against Black Californians, at least in 5 areas: health harms, housing, houselessness and housing segregation, mass incarceration and over-policing, and other areas as well. The task force produced payment frameworks that translated these harms into compensation models that in some cases reached 6-figure amounts per person, depending on years of residency and exposure. The recommendation of direct cash payments was therefore not symbolic. It was damages. It was how historical injustice was converted into the language of budgets, statutes, and policy. So overall, throughout the 5 areas, I think the total was like $800 billion. And that's a figure that, a lot of the news, kind of like Fox News and other places like that, they just like took hold to. They didn't really understand. They just saw $800 billion. So the headline is like, California's crazy reparations task force is recommending, the state provide Black people $800 billion. But that kind of misses exactly what the economists were trying to, say. Essentially what the economists were saying is throughout all those 5 areas, California has discriminated against Black Americans to the tune of $800 billion. $800 billion from statehood, which is 1852 to present, right? Due to California's involvement in slavery, due to California's involvement in health harms against African Americans, due to California's involvement in housing segregation, due to California's involvement in mass incarceration over policing, due to California's involvement in the lack of Black business formation or in the involvement of Black business discrimination. They counted all the numerical data up, and they found that again, $800 billion. So that's not a gift. Essentially, that's not what we were trying to say, that the state should give Black people $800 billion. The framework, the argument from the economists was, and this was truth backed up in numbers and data, that's how much Black people in California were deprived of in terms of the freedom to make businesses, in terms of the freedom for their businesses to not be discriminated against, and things like that. So the task force also understood that transformation requires institutions. We recommended a permanent state reparations agency similar to the Freedmen's Bureau that once existed in this country right after the end of slavery. The Freedmen's Bureau only lasted 7 years federally. After Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, President Andrew Johnson came into power, and he pretty much destroyed the Freedmen's Bureau, and also had a hand in destroying the Freedmen's Bank. So we once had, on a federal level, a permanent agency, kind of similar to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, to steward over and to provide benefits to ex-slaves. But again, that only lasted 7 years after Lincoln was assassinated. And so the California Reparations Task Force, we studied that history, and we recommended, something similar on a state level, right? A permanent Freedmen's Bureau on a state level, and hopefully it inspires the federal government to reinvent the Freedmen's Bureau on the federal level. But again, we recommended a permanent reparations agency modeled on a modern Freedmen's Bureau to verify eligibility and administer benefits. We also recommended a reparations fund to ensure that reparations would not be subject to annual political bargaining. We also recommended direct benefits like cash payments and programmatic repair. California, we did not limit ourselves to just recommending apologies or commemorations, even though we did recommend apologies and commemorations, but we also delivered a delivery system for repair, because symbolic measures alone do not remedy material harm. A quick note about eligibility, because since California was the first state task force to study reparations, we had to grapple with who could be eligible for reparations. And our task force lasted 2 years, and this debate on who should be eligible lasted almost a year, like 10 months. The first 10 months of our work was us grappling around this question. So eligibility was one of the most difficult design questions. California, we had to operate within federal constitutional law, California law, and international legal standards. In California, we have a state law called Proposition 209, which has been a law since 1993, and it prohibits race-based preferences in education, employment, and contracting for any reason. So in 2023, the United States Supreme Court also curtailed race-based affirmative action in education when justified solely by diversity. So in that legal landscape, we define eligibility on a lineage standard rather than a race-based standard. So most of what, when we're talking about the material benefits, the recommendations from our task force, they're designed to be based on lineage more than they are designed to be based on race. And in that legal landscape, lineage was chosen not to erase race, but to tie eligibility to specific historical harm in a way that could survive legal challenge and align with international law's victim group principle. So lineage, it doesn't necessarily replace race as a basis of injury. It provides the legal mechanism through which racial harm could be recognized and remedied in a constitutionally defensible way. So, our criteria is you're eligible if you're a descendant of an enslaved or free Black person living in the United States prior to 1900. So you don't have to, there's no standard of proof where you have to say you're Black to be eligible. To be eligible, you have to show that you are a descendant of an enslaved Black or free Black person living in the United States prior to 1900. Since the task force issued its final report in June 2023, as I mentioned earlier, it's now up to the California State Legislature to turn our recommendations into law. Since 2023, California State Legislature has had this is its third legislative session, the beginning of its third legislative session. So our California state legislators in the past 2 legislative sessions already picked up some of our recommendations and turned them into legislation. And our Governor Newsom, has signed some of those. Oh, thank you. So this past legislative session, Governor Newsom passed a bill to create a Bureau for Descendants of American Slavery. This is not the permanent agency that the task force recommended. Again, we recommended a permanent standalone agency. What Newsom signed was a bill to create like a sub-department within an existing department, the Civil Rights Department. And so look, progress, baby steps. But also, the Black legislature put money into the budget to develop genealogical verification systems and to support community education. At the same time, though, some of the most powerful structural recommendations from our task force were either vetoed by Newsom or delayed by our very own Black legislators, which I'm bringing up to talk about the tension between the victim group, right? Descendants of slaves, throughout the state of California. They expressed a certain vision for what reparations looks like to them, a permanent state fund, a permanent standalone agency. We're not there yet because we're still battling with our elected officials for our elected officials to listen to the injured group fully, right? And so, again, some of the bills that have been signed and passed into law is a formal apology for slavery. Newsom signed that in 2023. So the first legislative session out after the task force ended, that was actually the first bill that was passed, an apology bill. So the state of California had to officially apologize for its role in slavery and systemic discrimination, but they have yet to have a formal apology ceremony. They paid $500,000 for a plaque. We still haven't seen that plaque. So I don't mean to be all over the place, but I mean to share with you that, you know, there's this tension, right, again, between what reparations should look like, led and dictated by the victim group, and some of the slow progress that's being led by the people in power. So it's good that we have a formal apology on the books. It's good that, you know, there is some funding earmarked for reparations in the state of California now after the task force. And arguably, you know, it's good that there's actually a bureau now for descendants of American slavery. Nowhere else in the country can you say that there is a bureau specifically to serve the needs for descendants of American slavery. So we are making some very good progress in California, but there's a lot of work to be done. Let's see. So yeah, I say all that to say, you know, while some of the most powerful structural recommendations, including the Permanent Reparations Agency and the Permanent Reparations Fund, have been vetoed or delayed, this just illustrates how difficult it is to convert even the clearest historical record into lasting public obligation. That experience underscores that reparation frameworks must be designed not only to be morally sound, but to survive legislative bargaining, administrative resistance, and shifting political coalitions. So just this past year, I traveled to some different places to discuss reparations with different stakeholders. In November, I went to Minas Gerais, Brazil, where I observed that they actually have affirmative action in Brazil. It's completely legal. Race-based affirmative action is legal. Racial quotas are legal in Brazil. And so I observed how race-based affirmative action in university admissions is often implemented through this self-identification process. However, what they learned that in Brazil, people were self-identifying as Black to get a race-based benefit in colleges, but there was also a lot of fraud that went with that too. And so what they had to do was they had to implement what they called heteroidentification panels or heteroidentification panels, where essentially it's a tribunal of stakeholders and they're looking at you to see if you're Black enough to get the race-based benefit. So they're judging your hair, your skin, your phenotypes. And you know, what I've learned through, you know, this comparative analysis is that while that may or may not make sense within Brazil's legal and cultural system, that type of system probably would offend the sensibilities of Americans, right? And so I bring that up to say that's why the California Reparations Task Force, we recommended, you know, this lineage-based framework rather than this race-based framework. Because when you're talking about actually providing material benefits to people, you have to get into the weeds of how is that going to happen. But we're not talking about just general, you know, community centers. We're talking about direct material benefits to individual people. If we're really serious about reparations, we have to start asking those questions about the mechanics of how do you deliver the repair. And so that's why we recommended lineage, underscoring why genealogy, documentation, and verification are so important and less susceptible to fraud, and more aligned with, you know, American sensibilities. It's not to exclude people, but to ensure fairness, legal defensibility, and long-term survival. I'm gonna be wrapping up, but I also went to Lomé, Togo in December to you know, discuss reparations. I was invited by the 9th Pan-African Congress. And I just wanted to mention that, you know, reparations is a global conversation. And, you know, at that Congress, they called for formal acknowledgement, permanent institutions, and community-led processes. So what California and New York are doing domestically is a part of that same global movement. And then after Togo, at the end of December, I went to Ghana. And I don't know if we have time to play the video. It's not necessarily that important to play the video. But the video that do we want to play it? Oh, okay. So the video essentially was from one of the kings from Ghana, where essentially he apologized for his role, for the role of some African chiefs, African kings, African intermediaries in slavery. And it was met with a standing ovation. And it was a room of African Americans, other Afro-descendants, and continental Africans. And everyone stood up and was clapping. And it was an amazing rehabilitative experience. And why is that? Because, his apology, it wasn't about Afro-descendants trying to place blame on Africans. And his apology wasn't about Afro-descendants wanting anything more than an apology from Africans. It was simply about, it illustrated satisfaction, that form of reparations that I mentioned at the top of the presentation, right? We understood that him acknowledging the Africans' role in the slave trade with his authority, it altered the moral and political conditions under which restitution and rehabilitation can become possible, right? And so, again, him apologizing, that doesn't mean that we should be going after African kings for compensation or reparations. That's not what that means, absolutely at all. But what it does mean is that, with truth, there's rehabilitation, there's open relationships, we can connect with those African tribes, and we can have conversations about how do we steward over, there's currently cultural artifacts in European museums that were owned by Africans, right? How do we, those conversations, how do we work with these tribes to get steward ownership, right, over those cultural artifacts? And so that's why it was important that the African king apologized to the descendants. Again, it's not for him to say, we're going to give you money. No, that's for the Europeans and the American government. So taken together, these experiences point to a single conclusion. Reparations are not achieved through isolated gestures or rhetorical commitments. They require a documented record of harm, a clearly identified group, economic models that translate injury into compensable loss, and institutions capable of delivering repair over time. When those elements are built in a way that remains responsive to the injured community, reparations move from historical claim to public observation. And so this is New York's moment. You're building a formal historical record through these public hearings and business meetings. This is going to shape who you all decide will be eligible, what the harm assessment is, working with economists, and it'll also decide and determine what your remedies are. And so again, this phase that you guys are in right now are determining the future obligations for the state of New York. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Camilla Moore. And again, to Dr. Bailey. We're a little bit behind time. And so what I'm going to do is ask if Commissioner Tarrant Reed has any questions for either of our presenters before I ask one of each of you. And then following those question and answers, going to invite Senator Webb to make any comments that she may have, and then we'll take a brief break.
Thank you.
I can hear her, but can we turn up the volume? There she is. Hi, Commissioner.
Hi. Thank you, Vice Chair Jenkins. And nice to see you, General Counsel India. I'm very impressed with the presentations because history is an area that I've worked in for much of my life. With Dr. Bell, the memorialization piece is incredibly important. And Harriet Tubman, being the icon of freedom that she was, is somebody that we are required to acknowledge. There's another wonderful initiative by the Underground Railroad Coalition of New York State that is creating a route, a corridor, a Harriet Tubman corridor that goes from technically Maryland all the way up to Niagara. So it is really a key, impactful item that the New York State Commission needs to also examine and put forward. Again, the California Commission, and thank you, Dr. Camilla Moore, for your wonderful presentation. They are the trailblazers. And to look at the framework and also to compare it on some levels with the starting of our framework, I am pleased that we too are headed in the right direction. So thank you very much to both of the presenters and for the commission for once again putting on two extraordinary presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tarrant Reed. I will try to ask questions that can get a succinct answer if possible. Starting with Dr. Bailey, I loved it, and I thank you for your presentation and the great work that you and your colleagues do at the Harriet Tubman Center at the University of Binghamton. You don't know, but 2 years ago, my church, we traveled into the realm of freedom schools. So I totally am on the same page with you. And I believe this is something that we need to do. Can you share with us how you foresee that being pushed out legislatively? Because Senator Webb does know that they do currently fund freedom schools through the legislature. How do you foresee that being a part of the recommendation in our education piece? Yes, please. Just so that you can hear me.
Briefly, again, I think a lot of this has to do with our approach to this. As I was trying to mention in the end of my presentation, that it's not, for me, and I very much thank you so much, Ms. Moore, I'm so enamored and admiring of what California has done. I mean, you have to read that report, and it's incredible. But my sense is that it's both giving general reparations as well as specific reparations. So general to the community and then specific to individuals who were harmed and can prove that harm in their families. And I want to take it one step further, that something like freedom schools should be for the entire community. Because what we're realizing is that miseducation happens for every single person, American or otherwise, who's in our regular public school system, who comes out of that system not knowing, knowing the bare minimum about Harriet Tubman, definitely not knowing about many of the freedom fighters and advocates for freedom and equity that were of African descent, certainly knowing very little, not just about the African context, because the African context is very complex. It's both, they're participants, but they're also resistors. There are people on the African continent who are actively resisting the slave trade. And God knows we don't learn anything about that. And we don't learn anything about the larger context of the European and Americans, entities, plantation owners and banks and so forth, who are pushing and really dictating the terms of the slave trade to everybody. So all of this is knowledge that everybody needs. Does this make sense? So freedom schools, it's the approach. It's got to be for Black, white, Native American, Asian, everybody. So reparations in that sense really repairs the curriculum for all so that we can all be on the same page. And that's kind of the biggest thing that I see. And I just see that allies are also necessary. And that was kind of my last point there, is that allies have always been necessary. And many of us don't even know, not only do we not know some of the Black heroes, we don't even know some of the white heroes, the Thaddeus Stevens, the Garrett Smiths, the Fannie Kimbells. I mean, these are names that should be household names. You know why they should be household names? Because you want your neighbors to be fighting for the same thing. Does that make sense? We've never done this fight alone. We just have not. Slavery was not abolished by only people of color. Civil rights movement did not take place only because of people of color. Largely, it was Black-led, but there were always allies. And you want allies, you need allies. And that's what racial reconciliation looks like. So my idea is that Freedom Schools is Freedom Schools for all, obviously with an emphasis on people of African descent being able to be restored to the rightful history and knowledge of their histories and cultures. But really, it's for everybody. It's more an approach thing. Does that make sense? Than an existence of, and I think that was very much in keeping with what Martin Luther King, the direction that he was going towards the end.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bailey. Thank you. Before I ask Ms. Moore a question, any of the audience have a question for Dr. Bailey? Okay. Ms. Moore. Oh, there is one? Come, sir. Yes.
Yes, I'm just wondering, I'm very proud of being in New York because you were meeting with me and a presentation, very interesting. New York is not exactly where I got from. My question is, have you been working with national organizations? For example, I'm a representative, a field representative for Veterans for Peace. And Veterans for Peace is very much in support of what you're talking about. But have you been in contact with groups like Veterans for Peace? Peace Action, for example, also has, they claim to be the largest peace organization in the United States. Our executive director is back again. He was an executive director, Michael McPherson, for many years. Last year, he's back. He's an African American. I think that you should be in contact with Michael McPherson as a person who will be in contact with many other agencies. We have over 100 chapters around the United States. A lot of other states have been online. So I guess it is more of a comment than a question, but just, I am wondering if you are connected with other organizations, especially peace organizations in the United States.
Thank you so much for your contribution, actually, and your comment. So currently, no, but we do have a public hearing coming up that will specifically tie in the harms to veterans. Absolutely. So that will be an entry point for us to reach out to Mr. McPherson. And I'm so sorry if I made myself unclear. I wanted to know, and I'm going to follow up with that. And you can definitely speak again at the public hearing portion if you'd like to give us additional information. I just wanted to know if anyone had any questions for Dr. Bailey before I move to Ms. Moore. Okay, Ms. Moore. So my question to you, and thank you also for your wonderful presentation. And I piggyback off of what the gentleman said, that we're not where you guys are, but we're headed there. One of the questions I have, and as we have one of our state senators in here who supports our work fully, for the California Commission, did you all, and this is really for our going forward, should you all, or in hindsight, do you believe that have you all kept in more close contact with the Black legislative body of California? Would that have helped to move some of your 200 recommendations forward? I'm not saying that you didn't. I'm wondering what we can do so that we can keep their support for the work that we are doing as we continue. Yeah, if your voice carries, sure, but you can definitely come back up here. She needs to come up here? Okay.
Yes. So thank you for the question. Interestingly enough, on the 9-member California Reparations Task Force, 2 members were actually sitting elected officials. So two of the members, one was a Black State Senator Stephen Bradford, and the other was Black Assemblyman Reggie Jones Sawyer. So we had, Black state legislators sitting on our commission, and that was actually what was written, I think, in the bill that created the task force, was for at least 1 or 2 members to be on the commission. But to directly answer your question in terms of like advice, hindsight being 2020, I think the one and only thing that I can say is, I think moving forward, you guys should be intentional about, yes, maintaining really good relationships with the Black legislature, but be intentional about, moving forward, your business meetings and your public hearings. I think what's most important is for the task force and the Black legislature to be on the same page with the community. I think that's the key. It's for you guys to hold each other's hands, essentially, from the beginning of this process to the end of the task force process, and continue to hold hands together as you guys move from the reparations task force phase to turning whatever recommendations you all have into legislation. I think that's the most important thing. So be more intentional about outreaching to the community, be more intentional about hearing from the community in terms of what reparations looks like to them. Be intentional about actually incorporating the community's thoughts into your recommendations so that there's buy-in, collective buy-in from all stakeholders, the task force, the legislature, and the community all at once, but with the community in the lead. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We just want to hear from our experts, and we have, and we are so grateful to both Dr. Bailey and Dr. Moore. Right now, we're going to make space for our state senator to come and share words, Senator Leah Webb. Before we take a break, let's welcome Senator Webb.
Thank you so much. I'm quite cold, that's why I still have my coat on. But I first want to, of course, thank Dr. Jenkins, the entire team at the Commission on Reparations for the state, and of course, our great presenters, Dr. Moore and Dr. Bailey. So I know it may have been spoken about already, but I wanted to lift up very quickly just my respective involvement. So when I first got elected into the Senate, and when this particular measure to actually explore reparations here in New York, the governor signed legislation at the end of 2023 to establish this commission, and subsequently through the budget, I believe we initially allocated was like $5 million to support the efforts of the commission. I think one of the things that I often talk about, especially in our community here in the Southern Tier, is that there's so much power in telling our stories. And I appreciate Dr. Bailey lifting that up, because as someone that was born and raised here, I understand firsthand that there's a lot of history here in Binghamton, Ithaca, the Southern Tier, that is a part of our national story. Whether you talk about the mark on the Underground Railroad that's right at City Hall, right up the street, most certainly in Ithaca, where you have such civil rights leaders that were integral, like Dorothy Cotton, most certainly leaders here. There's a lot of stories that can be told, right? Where our Dr. Martin Luther King promenade was also a place where the KKK actively held rallies. And so there's such a intersection, again, of what we have seen here in the Southern Tier as part of our state story, most certainly our national story. And so I think the work of the commission is vital in not only lifting up not only past harms, but present impacts. And so a lot of the conversations we have in the state legislature, which another contextual piece I want to add, this is probably the most diverse representation we've had ever in New York State's legislature. There's now 72 members in both the Assembly and the Senate that are members of color. We've never had that before. And yet, even with that, we still don't have parity in representation. And so in sharing that, I want everyone to understand that while diversity is essential in talking about this particular subject with respect to reparations, and that how do we repair the institutional and the systemic problems that are caused by these decisions, it's important to have people in place to move them forward, but you don't have to have a title in order to do that. And so I encourage everyone who's here, and I appreciate you coming, to ask those questions. There's so much misinformation and missing information about what reparations actually, what they entail. And that's why I appreciated our presenters' information, because a lot of times people just think about the financial aspects when it's a lot deeper than that. It is most certainly looking at policies and also making sure that people have access and are in decision-making seats with respect to various institutions, just to give some additional context. So again, I'm delighted that the commission is here and continuing on its statewide public hearing tour to make sure that we as residents, whether it's here in the Southern Tier and across our great state, can not only walk away more informed, more connected, but most certainly more committed to making sure that everyone that resides here in our great state has a better quality of life today and for generations to come. Thank you so much for allowing me to spend time with you.
Thank you, Senator Webb. We're going to take a 5-minute break and then come right back and get to our public hearings. If you are virtually attending and have questions, please submit your questions virtually through the form. And those of you who are in this room, if you would like to make public comments, give testimony, please make sure that you've signed up in the back. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
All right, so while they'll take their 5-minute break, although it says 10 minutes, so we don't know which one they're going to take, 5 or 10. I just wanted to add a few things to this. I wanted you all to see it. I didn't want to stop the video and talk and stop and talk. I wanted to go all the way through because I want y'all to be able to witness what's going on, and hopefully you've been paying attention to the subtleties of certain things that they were mentioning. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I think Camilla Moore might be a foundational Black American, but the other lady, Dr. Bailey, she stated she's Jamaican. And the lady that was sitting down pretty much conducting everything, I think her name is Dr. Deborah Jenkins, she is also Jamaican. All right, if you paid attention, you can hear the slight accent in her voice from the very beginning of this video to even now. If you pay attention, you can hear the accent in her voice. And this was one of the things that I was saying earlier at the beginning, that you have situations where you have immigrants trying to, not only they're allowing them to kind of have a word and a say, and you see there was a subtle slight discrepancy about things when it came to what Camilla Moore said, and then when Dr. Bailey came back to make her little comments, you could tell that Dr. Bailey was trying to crowbar. She made mention of some keywords. I think she said Afro-descendant. If I'm not mistaken, it was Dr. Bailey that said that. That's the lady who had the green on. And she said that she was Jamaican. And also what was mentioned is she was trying to kind of crowbar Africa in it, or African descendants, or descendants of, I think she said African descendants. Now, what that does, now, Camilla Moore mentioned more of lineage, although she said something, I should have wrote it down, but she said something that was concerning to me. And I'll have to go back later and take a look at the video and write and make some notes. I should have been taking notes as everybody was talking. But the Dr. Bailey lady, well, Camilla Moore was mentioning lineage-based, not race-based, because when you go by race-based, then you can bring in Afro-Latinos, you can bring in people from the Caribbean they look black, Dominicans that look dark-skinned, and they could say they're black, Africans, of course, from Africa, the UK, Jamaicans, they all can come into the United States of America and have no lineage that was linked to American slavery. Now, Jamaicans can make a claim in Jamaica, right? And maybe some of these other Caribbean countries can make claims in their country, but they pretty much got to go to Britain or British to claim their reparations. And I think they have something called CARICOM, if I'm not mistaken, where the Jamaicans are already trying, or they've been talking about trying to get reparations. And they can't, because they can't get it from America, because none of their descendants or ancestors were in America during slavery. But what you're seeing is a back and forth where, if you, like I say, you got to listen to the subtleties of what's being said. They're trying to, one person or a group of people are trying to kind of crowbar in everybody who's black, who had this black skin, whether lighter or darker. They're trying to make a claim that everybody should come in and get reparations. But their relatives, their ancestors, had nothing to do with America and wasn't in America during slavery. When you do the research, there wasn't a whole thing of Jamaicans being brought to the U.S. And a matter of fact, there wasn't a lot of Africans that were brought to the United States during slavery. The majority of transportation was in Brazil. All right, there wasn't a lot of Africans that came, that were brought, not came, they were forcibly brought over to America. There wasn't a lot of Africans brought to the United States of America. So that means there were already black people in the United States. And then when they decided to start slavery, they took the people who were already in the United States and the very few that they brought over from Africa and brought them to the United States. They actually took people from before slavery. When slavery started, they took the people that were already in the United States and started transporting them other places in the United States. And some were even brought back to Africa and then taken back out of Africa and brought back to the United States. All right. See, you got to really do your research, because like I said, there's for those who are watching me on Black History Minute right now, that is one of my channels. I have a whole bunch of channels. So you're watching me on Thoughts of the Week podcast. You're watching me on What's the 411 News, and you're watching me on Black History Minute, whether it be YouTube or Twitch or Facebook or what have you. All right. And those who are watching me on Black History Minute on YouTube, I have a video that already, it's a YouTube Shorts video. It's about maybe 1 minute and 30 seconds long, explaining about how slavery was started in the U.S. and how people were taking black people from the United States and actually transporting some out of the country, putting them in and transporting them to Africa, then taking them out of Africa, bringing them back. And it kind of puts out the or dispels the myth about the slave trade, because on a general front, everybody thinks that it was that people, they stole people from Africa, put them in slave ships, chained them up, and brought everybody to the U.S. But the truth is, the majority of the slave, or the majority of the Africans that they say but forcibly over here, because it's two different things. So I got to be careful how I say that. The majority of them were taken to Brazil, and very few were taken to the United States. So in actuality, when they started slavery in the United States, actually they were human trafficking, because they was taking the black people that were already in the United States before slavery began. So we know that there were black people already here. Where did they come from? If they wasn't brought from Africa, they were already here. Some say they were the Black Indians. All right. And then they changed the, I forget the term they used, but they went from calling them Indians or Black Indians to Negro and mulatto and stuff like that. So you have that whole dynamic. All right. You have that whole entire dynamic. So that's another thing, because I've heard in years past, people were saying that the slave trade never happened in the United States. And I can almost kind of see where they're coming from to a degree, because like I said earlier, the majority of slaves that they took from Africa, bound them up and chained them, they brought most of them to Brazil. And then some of them other Caribbean countries along the way. That's what the majority of the Africans went to. So, and then there's books out. I have a few books. I have loads of Black history books, but I have a few of the books where it even says when the European people came over here, they seen Black people already here, even before Columbus. And they was telling each other like, hey, these look similar to the Africans that we done brought in and stole them and brought them over here, or bought them and brought them around other places. So they said we kind of looked like them, and I think they was basing it off of the skin tone, not like facial features and phenotypes, but they were looking at skin tone. And you have white people saying that.
So we're going to come back. We are anxious to hear from the public. And just as a reminder, we do have some people participating virtually. And in fairness to all, we're going to do one in the space, one virtually, as the list dictates. He just left. It's open. It's open. Mm-hmm. So he left. He's first. So the first public participant is Keisha Forrester. She's online, if she's still holding on. Keisha Forrester.
Good morning or good afternoon to the New York State Reparations Commission. Today, on behalf of Foundational Black American Freedmen, descendants of people enslaved in this country, including free Black Americans who were kidnapped and sold into slavery under Ms.
Forrester, can you pause for 1 second so that we can begin the timer?
Sure.
Thank you. Ready?
It's ready.
Thank you, Ms. Forrester. You can resume. You can start over if you like.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you on the commission. I speak today on behalf of Foundational Black American Freedmen, the descendants of people enslaved in this country, including free Black Americans who were kidnapped and sold into slavery under New York and colonial law. New York law role in slavery, was direct and profitable. State law authorized human bondage, enforced slave codes, and protected property claims in human beings. Wealth was extracted through generations of forced unpaid labor and absorbed into public and private institutions. When slavery ended, there was no restitution, no wages, no land, and no inheritance. That failure created what constitutional law recognizes as the continuing badges and incidents of slavery. The unresolved economic consequences of slavery itself under Supreme Court precedent, government has both the authority and the obligation to eliminate those conditions. Reparations are not symbolic. They are not social programs. Reparations are the settlement of a specific documented debt owed to a specific people. Accordingly, Foundational Black American Freedmen demand two remedies. First, substantial direct cash payments to eligible descendants of U.S. chattel slavery. The harm was economic and intergenerational. Only unrestricted capital repair can address stolen labor and stolen inheritance. Second, a full exemption from both New York State and federal income taxation for foundational Black American freedmen. Our ancestors' forced labor functioned as a lifetime tax imposed without consent. A permanent tax exemption is a lawful and proportionate response to that unpaid debt. New York has the authority to lead here. The record is clear. The obligation is overdue. Justice delayed is already justice denied. And through the last administration, with the influx of illegal immigrants and all of these sanctuary cities, including New York, opened up its coffers to those illegal migrants who came here. So the excuse that, you don't know how to pay for it, you don't have the money for it, no longer suffices. And with that, I conclude, and I thank you for that time.
Thank you, Ms. Forrester. The next person on the list is Mr. Jack Gilroy. Oh, I think he was the gentleman who spoke. Okay, Mr. Gilroy has spoken. He was the young man who mentioned the Veterans for Peace. I've recorded the information. Mr. Michael McPherson, his comments were very helpful. Thank you. Next up is Mr. Damon Wilson. Damon Wilson. Mr. Damon Wilson. Oh, he's not here? Okay. Oh, it's Reverend Doctors. My apologies. Okay. Next up online is Miss Chantel Williams. Chantel Williams. Is she there?
Hello. Good evening, members of the New York State Reparations Commission. My name is Chantel Williams, and I represent the New York Civil Liberties Union's Racial Justice Center in partnership with New Yorkers for Reparations. The Racial Justice Center, established in 2023, advocates at the intersection of racism and key justice issues, including environmental justice, indigenous justice, and Black restorative practices. Binghamton was not just touched by slavery, it was built on it. William Bingham, the founder and namesake of this city, amassed his wealth by capturing and selling Africans in Martinique. With that wealth, he purchased land here and appointed Joshua Whitney II as his agent. Both men supported and expanded slavery within this region. This city exists because Black lives were exploited for profit, and that exploitation was maintained through dehumanization. Right here in Binghamton, during slavery, a local newspaper advertisement read regarding an alleged assault. On Friday evening, a Negro man belonging to Mr. Rogers of this county attempted to commit violence. While the monster was endeavoring to accomplish his purpose, the mother attempted to drive him away. A Black man was described as belonging to Mr. Rogers and labeled as a monster. It is that language, the language that treated Black people as property and portrayed them as inherent threats, that laid the foundation for how Black people would be policed, punished, and imprisoned long after slavery formally ended in New York State. You can see it in how Black people are treated in New York State's criminal legal system, particularly here in Binghamton. Broome County consistently has one of the highest incarceration rates in the entire state, disproportionately impacting Black people. In Binghamton, Black residents make up 7% of the population, but make up 35% of the people arrested. And once arrested, a study that was conducted revealed that Black people face harsher outcomes at every stage of the criminal legal system, despite similar arrest rates for crimes like larceny. This includes fewer dismissals, fewer second chances, and more jail time than their white counterparts. Overall, Broome County, Black people are convicted of felonies 11.6 times more often than their white peers. Inside the jail, incarcerated people reported that refusing to work results in being placed in solitary confinement and loss of basic privileges, conditions that echo the forced labor and punishment from slavery. These are modern expressions of a system that was designed to control Black bodies and extract Black labor. We advocate for comprehensive criminal legal reform aimed at addressing the disproportionate incarceration of Black individuals in our communities. Our recommendations include the implementation of second look legislation, which examines the disproportionate sentencing between Black individuals and their counterparts for the same crime. Thank you.
Miss Williams, is she gone? She's gone. Okay, all right. Miss Williams, just for the record, could you clarify your recommendation for us again, please?
Yes, so we are advocating for comprehensive criminal legal reforms aimed at addressing the disproportionate incarceration of Black people. So one of those recommendations includes second look legislation, and where we will take a close look at how Black people have been sentenced over the years in comparison to their counterparts for the same crime and make adjustments based on those disparities.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Thank you. The next speaker who signed up is Josiah Stevens. Josiah Stevens. Josiah Stevens. Okay. Online, we have Mr. Ernest Russell from the Mr. Ernest Russell.
Hello, can I be heard? I'm online. Can you hear me? I don't have my video turned on.
We need your camera turned on?
Yeah, when I try to click it, it says the host has is disabled. So I need the invite from the host to turn on my video.
Okay.
All right, let's start a video. Okay. Then can you guys see me?
We can see you, thank you.
All right, perfect. So I just began my testimony just by wishing you a good afternoon, Dr. Deborah Jenkins, and I also want to wish Commissioner Linda Tarrant-Reed a good afternoon as well. I want to shout out to you guys as commissioners for taking the time to show up. I know that maybe other commissioners would have been here, but I do think across the board, you know, the Zoom option is available just so that everyone can be here, even if driving and, you know, other things are taking precedent. I will say to my comments today, in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King, that I want to read out some of his quotes, right? And he says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think what a lot of people forget in the context of reparations is that this is the original injustice. And every single time that our country ignores this injustice, they're prioritizing other injustices and saying this one doesn't matter. And so to his quote, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That is specifically for the context of those of us who wants to secure this type of justice. And I also want to go further and state in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King, because all of the solutions when it comes to this reparation space will ultimately take place in America when it comes to the descendants of those people who were enslaved here. And so he says, in spite of psychological appeals of the identification with Africa, we must face the fact that America is now our home, a home built in no small part through the blood, sweat, and tears of enslaved people and their descendants. As Americans, the solution does not lie in fantasies of separation or dilution, but engaging the creative minority of the concern within the apathetic majority and compelling movement towards the kind of power that produces real security and justice. And so in the words of Camilla Moore, I think the legislature, although they've pushed forward this study, they are a part of the apathetic majority that doesn't truly believe in cash compensation. I think if New York believes in cash compensation, then New York as a state should pursue a pilot program for descendants no different than they are pursuing UBI programs for a small portion of people in the state. And so one of the solutions I want to say today is that cash compensation is a requirement in this conversation. In addition to that, I think the lineage requirement speaks to the need for why cash compensation is a requirement. When you do the lineage, you will have a smaller pool of people who are eligible for said programs that the state produces. Now, while we understand that there is racial injustice happening to Black people all across this country. This topic of reparations, this history of New York, the history of Harriet Tubman, the history of Frederick Douglass in his state has nothing to do with the broader Black race. It has everything to do with the descendants of people who are enslaved in this state, their descendants, and those descendants who would migrate up from the South and come to this state and be subjected to the same policies and rules on the basis of their connection to slavery.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Thank you. The next participant is Brooke. Can she stand here? Oh, the mic's in the middle, in the back.
I appreciate that Camilla Moore clearly outlined the 5 forms of reparations. What we will not accept is legacy organizations taking large sums of money for programs we never see or advocacy that never produces results. We will not accept symbolic gestures like the Bruce's Beach situation, only for that land to be used in ways that do not benefit the injured group. And I am also grateful that Camilla Moore, Esquire, also addressed the Walter Plecker unconstitutional race-based classifications, which cause lasting harm and confusion. I am glad the commission got a chance to hear a lawyer explain constitutional law, something we, the foundational Black American freedmen, have been stressing over and over again, all while being chastised by the lawyers that serve as commissioners. Dr. Bailey repeatedly used the phrase people of African descent, but that language lacks the specificity required for law. One knife sticks both approach does not work when preparing a legal claim. Precision matters. As the FBA proverb says, that dog won't hunt. Only Black Americans were enslaved in this country on this soil under laws of the United States. Therefore, damages must go to the harmed group and no one else. And we've given this country enough time, no more delay to what is owed. When Camilla Moore said that the harmed community must be satisfied, that means exactly that. No one, whether a Jamaican working for the working for the Harriet Tubman Foundation or anyone else of any other lineage, has the authority to tell foundational Black American freedmen when we shall feel satisfied with our justice claim. When we refused to accept the failed model of South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation process. It did not deliver justice, and we will not allow those same mistakes to be repeated here. During the business meeting, Dr. Jenkins mentioned the need for speakers. I'd like to remind the commission that the U.S. Freedmen Project was the only group to present a workshop specifically focused on reparations at the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Caucus Weekend, which, by the way, is an interesting form of delineation for the Puerto Ricans from the rest of the Hispanics. I've also mentioned previously that Andrew Barnes from Numbers USA should also be brought in to do a presentation on how immigration has hurt foundational Black Americans and pushed us to the back of the hiring line. I would like to take this time to thank the foundational Black American family for their continued support and making sure that we were live in person here today. Thank you.
Brooke, can you tell me the name again, please?
My name is Brooke.
No, the name that you recommended.
Oh, Andrew Barnes of Numbers USA.
Which USA, I'm sorry?
Numbers USA. And then our President Devine of the U.S. Freedmen Project. He's the one who did the
presentation?
Yes, the presentation at the caucus.
And also spoke at our Utica meeting.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And actually, you're next, Divine Prince.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Divine Prince. I'm the current president of the U.S. Freedmen Project. I want to personally thank Chairwoman Camilla Moore for coming out and sharing her time What you don't know is that this is not the first time she has addressed this commission or this New York State legislative body on how to get reparations correct. The U.S. Freedmen Project worked closely with the California Task Force, including Chairwoman Camilla Moore, Dr. Shirley Weber, Dr. Jovan Scott Lewis, and we addressed all of the New York State legislators on how to get reparations not only right, but constitutionally correct. And so this current iteration of the bill, unfortunately, is unconstitutional because the legislative body ignored all that professional testimony, something that I hope they don't do today with her testifying again. See, I want you guys to understand the definition of an African. An African is a native or inhabitant of the continent of Africa. So anyone, regardless of race, hue, or ethnic group, that is an inhabitant of the continent of Africa can be considered someone of African descent. For example, our new mayor in New York City, Zoran Mamdani, he came out and identified as an African-American, even though he is an East Indian from Uganda. This is the problem with racial language, something that Camilla Moore went over and talked about. So with the rest of my testimony, I just want to give honor to one of the greatest Black Americans I believe that has ever walked this earth, and that is Dr. King. His birthday was on the 15th. We're going to observe it again on Monday. And he talked about that concept of being African. He said, we know nothing about Africa, although our roots are there in terms of forebearers. But I mean, as far as the average Negro today, he knows nothing about Africa. And I think he's got to face the fact that he is an American. His culture is basically American. And one becomes adjusted to this when he realizes what he is. That's what this commission is supposed to be about. Black American citizens that were formerly enslaved that are now coming to get our just due. Racial justice is a formidable cause, but it's not reparations. We must separate the two. A recommendation I made at the Utica hearing. Separate the two so that we don't have to be subject to a constitutional challenge based on race. Dr. King also talked about that a society that has done something special against a Negro for hundreds of years must now do something special for the Negro. That's what reparations is. That's the harmed group. And with my last 30 seconds, I want to talk about a conversation that Dr. King and Harry Belafonte had. Because we all know the quote that people talk about when they say that Dr. King said he integrated his people into a burning house. But most people don't know about that second half of the conversation when he was talking to Harry Belafonte. And he said he saw a sadness on Dr. King's face that he hadn't seen in almost forever. And he said, so what do we do if we integrated our people into a burning house? And he said, we become the firefighters. And the freedmen are the firefighters. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. If there's anyone else who'd like to give public testimony, the floor is open. If not, we will bring our public hearing to a close. And thank you all for being here. And we have taken notes of all of your comments, and we will share it with the full commission. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it, man. That's the end of the public hearing reparations. We definitely appreciate y'all for tapping in. And like I mentioned a little earlier, right before their as their 5-minute break was coming back, is that just like they mentioned, right? Both Brooke and Divine Prince mentioned that, just like I said earlier, Bailey was trying to crowbar Africans or other people that look like they could pass for Black American when she used African descent. And see, that was what I was talking about at the very beginning of this live, that there's a lot of game playing being played when it comes to these reparations task force. You got other people trying to mix in, and they're throwing in their little terms, and we don't know if they're being sent by Democrats. We don't know if they're being sent, doubtful if it's Republicans, but they're being sent by someone that's trying to maneuver the wording when it comes to reparations. And that's what I was talking about. I think I mentioned earlier that you would hear Brooke say something about that. And then also you had Divine Prince break it down as well. And that's the reason why I said I was kind of doubtful of even broadcasting this, because I'm recognizing there's all these games being played, and not just New York, in Atlanta, in Boston. I think Detroit has their reparations task force. So you have many little cities here and there. Maybe even Philly might have some. And what is happening is they're bringing in Black immigrants, or so-called Black immigrants. When I say that, I mean Jamaican, like Dr. Bailey is. Also, you have Dr. I forgot the lady who was just the one that was pretty much orchestrating it. I think her last name is Jenkins. She's Jamaican, or she's of some type of Caribbean descent. And then you have other cities that brought in Haitians, also Jamaicans. You had them out, also some type of Africans might have been brought in. And that's the problem. That's the trick they're trying to run. So it just seems like it's more delay through a lot of trickery. And that's the game that's going on. And so it just seems like it's a thing where it's just like, let's continue doing these hearings and continually distract. We'll continue to have these hearings and keep on putting in our wording. We'll try to keep on putting in people of African descent. And just like Divine Prince mentioned, the new mayor of New York, Mamdani, is of, quote unquote, he said he was of African descent, even though he's an Indian from Uganda. And see, Mamdani, by Dr. Bailey saying African descent, then that can make Mamdani go on and make a claim for reparations. So you see where I'm coming from when I'm mentioning that. That's a lot of games being played. And we can, you know how we are as foundational Black Americans. Our history is always the fight. And we'll give it to you real quick. We'll give you the business real quick. And that doesn't mean a physical fight. It can be just like you see here in the reparations, where you have Brooke and Divine Prince break it down all the way down as to what's going on and what we're not tolerating. And then the lady and the guy that was on the Zoom call, because they couldn't be at the actual location, so they talked on the Zoom. Those two also broke it down to make it clear. So you have 4 people breaking it down. So my guesstimation is not only this next one, and we'll put that on the screen. I think the next one live is going to be on the 14th of February. There you go. At 3:45 to 5 p.m. I think that's like what, an hour and a half, or hour and 15 minutes, 90 minutes at best. And so we I don't know if that's going to be like a public hearing. It says the title of it is Reparations, the Urgency of Now. So I guess they're going to have speakers probably, and they might let people give people a chance to give questions or something like that. And you just got to pay attention to the wording. Just like I said, that's the game. People are going to crowbar. You're going to hear the words Afro-descendant might be mixed in there. You're going to hear African descent. Notice nobody ever says lineage based, or specifically for the descendants of chattel slavery in America, which Brooke and Divine Prince mentioned. And I think the other two on the Zoom, I know the first lady that was on it who had the flag in the background, the Juneteenth flag in the background, she mentioned it. And then I guess the guy mentioned his as well. So that's the game, again, like I said, is being played right now. That's the trick that's being played. Is they're going to try to change the wording, or for those who might be watching this or who will watch the next one if I broadcast. I'm gonna try to broadcast this other one live. It's going to be actual live. And if you're not haven't been paying attention, you'll think that everything that everybody's saying sounds good, and you're not understanding the little subtleties and the nuances of the trick games that's being played with the word games. All right. So I wanted to let y'all know and keep y'all kind of up on game, if you will, about the word games that they play. You're going to have a few people that's, again, I'm repeating myself. You're going to have a few people that's going to say Afro descendants. That's a trick. That's a gameplay. They playing games. Or African descent. People of African descent. That had nothing to do with, none of their relatives were here in the United States. None of their relatives had nothing to do with being in slavery, because like I mentioned earlier, there weren't that many Africans that were stolen or taken or trafficked from out of Africa and brought to the United States. Most of the majority of them was brought to Brazil and maybe other neighboring countries. So that means there was already, if before they got to the United States with these slaves or these people they captured to make them slaves in the United States, before they reached to the land of the US, there were already Black people here before slavery even existed or was happening. And then you had a lot of European explorers come and say, well, man, these people look similar to the ones we done stole out of Africa, or the ones we dealt with in Jamaica or Aruba or Brazil. They look similar to them. So that means there was Black Americans already here before slavery began. And then they just, like, I forget which one mentioned it, they done took some of the Black people already here, whether you want to say they were Indians, Black Indians, or what have you, Seminoles, the Black Seminoles, which really the Maroons in the US. As a matter of fact, for those who's watching on Black History Minute, y'all need to, for those who are not, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Black History Minute, because I'm gonna have, I think I got a video coming up about the Maroons. So y'all stay tuned for that. Maybe in the next couple of days, you'll see something about the Maroons. Another one of those YouTube Shorts videos I've been putting out. So you might want to check that out. So we have Black Maroons here. People are always familiar with the Maroons in Suriname and Jamaica, but we have Black Maroons in the United States, from Florida to South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, I think a little bit of Georgia. We have Maroons there and here in the US that people don't talk about in schools, sure don't teach. So Black people were already here in America before slavery started. Then they got here, took some, like I said earlier, took some of them, brought them over. Maybe brought some to other states and stuff like that, but then brought them over past the waters. Maybe brought some of them to Jamaica, brought some of them back to Africa, then took them back out of Africa and brought them back to the US. That's human trafficking, what's going on. And then it was something mentioned, I'll say this before I go. It was something mentioned, oh man, it was on the tip of my tongue. Oh man, I have to go back and look at the video, and then maybe on the next live one at the end, when it's done, maybe I'll speak on it then, unless it comes to me. But yeah, so that's what's going on. Like I said, watch the trick words that's being used. There's a lot of trickery going on with the word play when it comes to these reparations task force, and also bringing in other immigrants, so-called Black immigrants. All right, which also there were a lot of immigrants that wasn't calling themselves Black, and I have the video proof. If y'all want to go to my other YouTube channel called, what is it called? Clips Reloaded. I got so many channels, it's ridiculous. Full Clips Reloaded, I think it's called. It just hit me. Go to Full Clips Reloaded on YouTube. I'm gonna have to start making these other channels on Twitch and so forth, the same ones, so that can be broadcasted. But on Full Clips Reloaded, I have loads of videos where other Africans were saying things. There's a video where there's a Haitian, there's Jamaicans, there's so I think somebody from Trinidad, there's a Nigerian, all in that one video. These young people, they kind of busting out, telling the truth, saying they're not black. So we know that it was a time when these immigrants wasn't trying to claim to be black. We have the video proof. Okay. So definitely check out Full Clips Reloaded. I think that's what it's called. I got to start I'm going to put some videos with Trump on there too pretty soon regarding this recent thing about the Michelle and Barack Obama, the monkey video. So I'm going to put his the interview where he talked about that on Full Clips pretty soon. So yeah, I got some work to do, but y'all check it out. Again, let me put it on the screen. February the 14th. That's on a Saturday, 3:45 to 5 p.m. I think it's like an hour and 15 minutes, 90 minutes total, unless they go over. We're going to try to broadcast that live. That's going to be a live event. And we're going to broadcast it on Black History Minute, What's the 411 News, and Thoughts of the Week podcast. All right. So y'all definitely check that out. And yeah, we appreciate y'all. I want to thank everybody who came in on all the platforms that we went live on today. I should have went on live events now as well. Probably should have done that. As a matter of fact, yeah, I think from now on, I'm just going to put actual live events on that channel. So on YouTube, I have another channel called Live Events Now. So you have all these places you can go to unless you're just loyal to specific channels of mine. That's cool. But I'm also broadcast on Live Events Now on YouTube. Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm going to do if I go live with it. So February 14th, 3:45 to 5 p.m. If you miss it, it'll be there for you on the replay on all these platforms. I appreciate y'all for tapping in. Got a lot of loyal people that come on my Twitch. Shout out to y'all. Y'all pretty loyal, man. Y'all come on every time I go live. I just added Black History Minute today, and people were in and out on that. Stayed a pretty good long period of time, so I appreciate y'all. But I have so many subscribers on Black History Minute because they're loving the Black History videos that I'm dropping on them. I'm actually doing it every day for this month of February. So this is day 9. So tomorrow's day 10. I think in a couple of days, I'm going to do the one I mentioned. I forgot what it was already. Got so much stuff to do, man. Let me see real quick. Let me just see real quick. I don't want to bore y'all with me talking about all this stuff here. Yeah, the Maroons in America, the Black Maroons in America, the Black Seminoles. So that video is coming up soon. Tomorrow, I don't want to tell you what tomorrow's video is. You got to go check it out. So go to Black History Minute on YouTube. As a matter of fact, let me see. You can go to this link here as well. You can also go to either one of these links. It'll take you to the YouTube channel as well. Also, you can read articles also there if you go to any one of these links. And I'm going to try to put the live video. Well, I can't do that on the, I think I can. I think I can put the shorts on there. So tomorrow's video, I'm going to try to do it on a regular basis. Tomorrow's video will be on that site. Actually, you can go right to the site. Well, wrong one there. Wrong one. Go right to the site, and you'll be able to watch the video there, or should be anyway. All right. If you just want to watch it from this website or the bio site, if you will. And yeah, keep tuning in. Keep watching us on Thoughts of the Week podcast. What's the 411 News? Black History Minute. And with that being said, I appreciate y'all once again. Y'all don't know, man. I love it when y'all come on live, man, and watch it. I love when y'all come and check out the videos as well. It's definitely much appreciated. Again, Black History Minute has a video coming out tomorrow, man. So y'all go to that channel. And like I said, I'm doing a video every day on Black History Minute, on Black History, all the way through the month of February, all right? So definitely be checking it out. Thank y'all again. This was the January 17th New York State Community Commission reparations hearing. It was the public hearing. There was one on January the 9th. So you'll have to go to Thoughts of the Week podcast or What's the 411 News to see that one. All right. But from here on out, any more reparations hearings, I will also be adding it to Black History Minute and our live events now, the channel on YouTube. We need to probably put that on Twitch too for any live events, any free or any paid live events. We're going to put it on maybe on if it's a paid one, we'll just give you like a brief trailer or something like that for live and give you a link or something on how to see it if you want to pay for it, because we're probably going to have some live events, some free and some paid, maybe this summer. So yeah, I got a lot of work, but I got a lot of AI tools that help me out. All right, to keep me moving pretty quick. So once again, I appreciate y'all. Thank you again. Can't say thank you enough. I'm constantly telling you thank you, thank you, thank you. Be sure to subscribe to all the channels that I mentioned or whichever channel you watched this from. Hit the notification bell because YouTube is removing some subscribers off the channels. This is nothing new because I'll see, for instance, I had 900 and something on Thoughts of the Week podcast, and now it's moved down to like 897. So they're moving some people off of there on purpose, trying to not make the channel known. I got about 295 on What's the 411 News. It was 296. So all of a sudden, one got bumped off. The only one that stayed consistent, surprisingly, is Black History Minute. I got over 1,200 subscribers. I got 20 new subscribers in the last few days. I think off the strength of the videos I've been putting out, the Black History videos. So a lot of people subscribe to that channel, and surprisingly, no one has been booted off of that channel. But to keep you from not getting booted off, make sure you hit the notification bell. Tell your family and friends to subscribe to whatever channel you're checking out. Hit the notification bell, because if you don't, you won't know if we're coming on live. That doesn't always guarantee it's going to notify you, because there's been problems with that as well. But at least do everything you can to stay subscribed. Keep checking every now and then. Make sure you wasn't bumped off as a subscriber to the channel. And appreciate it. I see some people in What's the 411 News. I thank you. I see y'all coming in. Yeah, I just jumped out just now. But it's all good. You'll probably check it out later. And so I want to thank those who will be coming back watching the replay of this video. I want to thank everybody who watched me live. Be sure to check things out. I'm going to have some more brief news coming soon on What's the 411 News. And some more Black History videos coming. And I also have pandemic news report for those who want to stay ahead of what's going on in the disease news and health news. I'm going to have some stuff coming out there as well. And for those who are into the geopolitics, you can check out my channel, The Presidential News Brief. Very informative. You'll be up on things geopolitically. You'll find out what the world leaders are doing from all around the world, what they're up to. And yeah, that's how we roll. All right. I appreciate y'all. I am out of here. One love. Let me see. I want to always leave y'all with a word about something, something. What can I tell y'all? What can I tell you? I'm going to have to do it the next time. Because there's times when I think about something and then I say, oh yeah, I could leave them with this. but then I end up forgetting what it is. But I be having it written down somewhere, but I try to remember it. So, oh man, I don't know. I'll do it the next time. All right. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all. I'm out of here. Peace.